Stephen Bettis, welcome to Football Heaven.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for your time then this evening. I suppose after a summer where quite a bit has happened, and we'll get into the finer details across the course of this hour, why has it taken until the 15th of October for an official of Sheffield United to speak publicly?
I think you have to pick the right moments within the season and with what's going on, etc., to come out and talk, to be honest. And I think that, there are times when you can't speak about things that are going on, and there's a lot of stuff that's going on at times that's confidential, sorry. And it's kind of, you've got to pick the right moments when you can speak freely about where we're at and what's going on. And I think at this point in time, Chris is back as the manager, and we've got a clear position on where we are for the rest of the season, basically.
And fans know you. You've spoken publicly before and sat in this programme. But when we told the world that you were coming in, some of the earlier responses were, when are the owners of the football club going to speak publicly and outline in their own words what their plans for Sheffield United are? Is that likely to happen?
I'm sure in the future at some point it will do. At this point in time, I think they're happy for me to speak on behalf of them. I'm now a member of the board as well since they've taken over ownership. So I'm involved in all the decision-making processes, etc. with them, and I have a voice. So I think they're happy for me to be here and represent them in that respect.
I think that's probably answered 30% of the questions right off the bat. I think to sort of follow that up, I think part of it is because fans in some way, shape or form want to get to know them as owners rather than just being names on the website as a list of, well, 2 or 3 principal owners and then the board beneath that. Whether it might do them some good for fans to get to know them.
I agree. I think it will take time. It's still in the infancy of their ownership, and that will come with the time that they're here and the years that they intend to be owning the club for. I think there will be a bigger connection with them and the supporters as that goes along. Obviously they live thousands of miles away in the US, so they're not here on a daily basis or a weekly basis. But they were attended quite a few of the games this last season, and I expect them to attend a number of the games this season. I suppose calm is maybe not the right word. We're still not getting the results that we want and expect on the pitch, but I think there's a decision been made that we're happy to stick with and see out the season with. So I think that now's the right time to have those conversations. Yeah.
Whose idea was it, and who sanctioned the dismissal of ChrisWilder post Wembley?
It was a board/ownership decision at that point. I think following the disappointment of the playoff final, there were obviously discussions, and that's rightfully so. I think discussions should be had about whether that's the right decision for the future of the football club, etc. I think at the time the owners felt that they wanted to go in a different direction. They wanted a different style of play, maybe a different way of recruiting, etc. And there were those various thoughts around it at the time, and there was those various discussions around it. I think ultimately they've realised that the decision they made was a mistake, and they've been open and honest about that and put their hands up. And I think you've got to give them a lot of credit for that, because they did that, in a very short 5 or 6 games, if you include the cup game. They didn't hang around. They realised it wasn't working, and they were big enough to own up and say, we made that mistake. And I think, they've not lied about the situation. They're inexperienced in terms of their footballing history, and they've come into the club and they want the best for the club. But like everybody, they'll make mistakes along the way, and I think it's how you handle those mistakes which shows how you're going to be as an owner. And I think they've handled this one really well in terms of the time and the speed at turning it around and reinstating Chris.
When it comes to timing, fans were getting in touch with us in the summer saying, look, whether they were for or against the decision to sack ChrisWilder, why did it take several weeks from the final to ultimately reach that point? Does that suggest that not everybody was in agreement with this?
No, I think what it says is that they wanted to take a considered decision. They didn't want it to be an emotional decision, and I think if you had done something in the first week to 10 days of the playoff final, that would have been emotionally led. So they wanted to take a bit more time for those emotions to settle before they then, moved those discussions forward.
The appointment then of Ruben Selles, there were rumours at the time of his appointment that he was appointed without a full selection process. Is that correct?
I think the answer to that is, did they go out and interview loads of other potential managers? No, they didn't. Ruben was recommended to them. They met with Ruben initially before I did. They got a really good feeling about him at the time. Really liked what he said about the way he worked and the principles behind what he was trying to achieve, etc. And they felt like he was aligned with where they wanted it to go. So they didn't interview other candidates. It was Ruben, and that decision was made based on that. I think with hindsight, they probably feel they should have interviewed more people in that respect, but as I said, they've made the mistake, and they've admitted to it and rectified it.
And when did the owners believe at the time that they were making such a seismic decision over changing a manager, whether it happened to be ChrisWilder or somebody else?
No, I don't think they did, and I think this is a realisation for them. I think when you look at the press statement they put out, they noted various things there about actually the impact of changing the manager and how much, when they brought Chris back, how much at times it's not just about the person as a human being. They need to be able to connect with a football club, and they need to be able to connect with the DNA of the supporters and the DNA and the philosophies of the style of football and that sort of thing. And I think we all know, and it's proven, that Chris gets that.
So what changed then over the course of that period of time? What made Sheffield United's board want to sack ChrisWilder and then trust him with such a big responsibility 5 or 6 matches later? What's changed?
Well, I think just their understanding more of the situation. They sacked Chris after getting 92 points and getting into the playoff final and missing out by the finest of margins on promotion to the Premier League in the final itself. And I think we all don't want to relive that day, but there were various things that happened within the game as well, which if you look at them in isolation, they could have been, if they'd gone a different way, would have completely changed the outcome. So we were so close to getting promoted. The number of points that we achieved in the league, I think 8 times out of the last 10 years, that gets you automatic promotion. So actually when they've looked back and then seen how difficult it actually is to win games in the Championship, which is such a competitive league, and the prize of promotion to the Premier League makes it that way. They understood how good a job Chris actually did last season.
That decision, that change of manager, what was the ultimate cost here to Sheffield United? Because it seems in so many different ways and levels, it was a very costly decision.
Yeah, I'm not going to go into the financial costs of it, because I don't think that's the right thing to do. But there was obviously a financial cost to it, without a doubt. But there's also, I feel like, hangover, for want of a better word, is another cost to the situation in terms of Chris has now picked the team back up. I think there's a lack of confidence, maybe, and a lack of belief in the team, and he's got to get that reinstilled into the players. And I think when you take our most recent game, when Harrison Burrows misses the penalty in the 87th minute last season, Harrison scores that penalty, and actually with the added time, we've got about 9 minutes. We go on and win that game last season, but there's just not that belief and confidence, I think, in the team at the moment, and that takes time to build back up, and you can see it's coming. You can see the results are. Yeah, we're still not winning many games, but the results are getting a lot closer. We played Southampton, where I think we should have got something out of that. And Southampton are obviously a team that's been relegated from the Premier League last season, and definitely you'd think will be there or thereabouts this season. And I think we're becoming more competitive, and I think very soon, hopefully, those games that go the other way and we start getting some wins on the board.
Paul, the process behind the sacking of the manager and appointing Ruben Selles, to paraphrase what he was saying, is dysfunctional. And what lessons have been learnt that at that point where Chris moves on, or however that pans out, it won't happen again?
Yeah, I think the process wasn't correct in terms of the way we made the change. We've discussed it and obviously looked at it since and reviewed what happened, and I think the guys have learnt a lot from it, and I don't think the process would be the same in the future.
The recruitment process, sort of to do with the likes of the big name players, the likes of Unveil and Vinicius. It was sort of regarding, so Vinicius, he went quite early on in the window, it's safe to say. I think we had about a month to go before the game started in the actual season competitively. So we're wondering, going into that season, what the sort of thought process was behind getting a replacement, because it felt like the transfers for a type of player like him felt like it was very last minute on getting a replacement. And at the time when he went, it was sort of getting in a lot of trial players that are for the future, where it felt like we didn't actually have much of an idea of how to replace him, and then sort of panic bought.
Yeah. Let's touch on the various points that you've raised. I think taking Anel and Vinicius first, in terms of us, selling them, it was very clear early on that we would sell both players in this window. Both had made their intentions very clear that they didn't want to be at the football club next season in the Championship, and wanted to move on to another club. And Nel also had 1 year left on his contract, which means that we were at risk of letting him go at the end of this season on a free transfer, and had no desire to extend his contract with us. So, which we did ask the question on. So for us, it was very clear that they were going to go. Targets were identified for those positions. I think this is a frustration of supporters all the time, and everyone, it's a frustration for all of us. We all want players in quicker than we get them in, without a doubt. I think we as a club, we're quite happy. We make clear decisions on what we want to do with a squad at the end of the window. Right now, Chris and I are very clear on what we want to do in January, as an example, already. And we want to get our business done, which is the ins as well as the outs, as quickly as possible. Unfortunately, it takes two to tango with this stuff, and at times the other clubs don't want to move at the same pace as us, don't want to move at the same speed as us, and these things take longer than we expect and than we like. Ben Godfrey's a prime example, where we signed close to the end of the window. It wasn't a panic signing. We'd been in for Ben since June/early July in terms of our intentions. We made an offer to sign Ben. We stuck to our guns in terms of the pricing, and in the end they agreed to do it at that level. But we had to wait a long time for them to come to the table and agree to that. And that's the same for a number of other players. I appreciate your frustrations, and we share the same frustrations, but at times it just takes longer than we'd all like.
Right, no, that's fair enough. I still get what you mean. So, yeah. But when it came to other players, for example, why did it feel like as if we were only signing play? And I get that not all clubs are going to want to move the same moves, but you look around and you go on the club's track record when it comes to signings, yep, where it always feels like we're very late on. And I know it can work to the benefit. You saw the likes of Morgan Gibbs-White join very late on a few years ago, and that was a massive, massive benefit to the club. But then you look around at other clubs who were signing players who you think, that's surely a no-brainer. What is it that potentially makes it so that we just aren't as quick off the mark?
Yeah, I mean, just picking up on the Morgan Gibbs-White one, we got a phone call 24 hours before the end of the window to say he was available. So we literally got that deal done in about 20 hours from being told of it. And at times things don't present themselves till late in the window for us to make those decisions. Yeah, other clubs do things, do get other stuff done early. But I think if you look at the transfer window as a whole, if you sit on Sky Sports on the last few days of the window, that's when the majority of the action and the majority of the deals are being done, because it's just the nature of the beast and how long it takes, and people hanging out to try and get the best prices they possibly can. I think also we want to be strong in our position. We want to be, we're not just going to give over and pay more than what we expect for players, etc. And sometimes that takes a little bit longer, but I think in the end we reap the benefits of it financially by being tough in that respect.
Recruitment then. Let's delve a little deeper into all of this. After influence did James' board and short circuit have on our transfers early in this summer? Secondary question to all of that. Do he and they still have a part in our scouting and transfer strategy?
Yeah. So James is connected to the owners, to the football club, and he has a relationship with them. He has what we think is kind of a data and AI model around identifying talent, etc., that we think maybe is slightly different to everyone else, but still along the same guidelines. I think he heavily influenced some of the young emerging talent that we signed, but the owners were willing to take that risk on the basis that they were relatively small transfer fees and contracts, and making sure that, and Chris will give testament to this, they wasn't taking out any of the recruitment process that the manager wanted at that point in time. If he wanted 3 different positions, he was still getting those 3 different positions with the young AI kids that we brought in. So they were just an addition. And the reality of it is, yeah, they're a gamble and they're not all going to work. But, we've done four, potentially 5, you could argue. Probably if one of them works, we're in front from a financial perspective at that point. So with the young ones, that there was a heavy influence from James in terms of recommending those, and they were coming from markets that we didn't have a huge amount of knowledge of. So for sure, there's that side. I think with the normal recruitment and the players that we're bringing in, other than that, it's an additional help in terms of we identify a number of players for each position. They get sent over to James and his team, who then run them through their kind of AI and data machines and give us what their numbers look like to assist in the process. And it's more a kind of sense check and a double check to make sure that what we're thinking is right. So on the main targets that we're picking in each season, it's still our manager, our head of recruitment, our scouting team that are identifying this talent, and James is just reviewing it and sense checking it and giving an extra level of confidence to what we're doing.
Fans, though, raise eyebrows when one of those players ends up at Dunfermline.
Yep.
And Sheffield United, they don't want their team signing players essentially for somebody else.
Yep. So he was one of the youngsters that I've talked about. We didn't feel it was working here for him. And as I said, they certainly aren't all going to work, and a small percentage of them are probably going to work. So, but he was one that we didn't feel was working. There was an opportunity to send him there and let him go and get game time. There are incentives for us if he goes there and does well in terms of and gets sold, etc. We're heavily compensated at that point. But we felt it was better for him to go and get game time somewhere and develop as a player, and hopefully see that kind of the data and numbers that are behind him actually turn into performances on the pitch.
Blade shirt, similar theme. Was the signing of Caceres and Chukwu and Ukaki good value at supposedly 3 million? Some of these numbers you might come back at this or not, it's up to you. When they've taken up valuable ESC places.
So the numbers are not correct, but I'm not going to go into. They're lower, but I'm not going to go into more detail than that. Yep, I think that's a learning process for us in terms of the ESC places. We do well. We get the maximum amount that you can get as a club, and historically we've hardly really used them. But I think as our recruitment develops and the pool that we're looking into, the pond that we're looking to fish in is becoming bigger, then ESC becomes more relevant for us at times. And that was one of the reasons for letting Jefferson go at that point, was to free up an ESC space.
Who's the main driver for short circuit amongst the board then for the future of the football club?
What you mean supporting Short Circuit the most?
Yeah.
I think it's a collective decision. I don't think it's right to, we as a board, we make decisions, and I don't think it's right to single out. I wouldn't say who voted what way or the other. We make a decision, and if it's a majority, it happens, and we all then commit to it 100%. So, but there are people that he has a relationship with that have brought him in at the time that believe in everything that he's doing.
Has a myth developed here about essentially two strands of the football club? You got the first team. So in the summer, it looked as though initial recruitment by the board were essentially players at the younger end of the markets, even before you get as low down, with great respect to Casera, as we're talking about, Tyler Binden and one or two others that came through the football club, to then, as I think Jamie kind of alluded to, oh no, it might not work, so let's get some more players that maybe an established championship manager like, lo and behold, ChrisWilder might want.
Yeah. No, I mean, Tyler was a Ruben Selles recruitment. He had him previously, same as Louis Barry, Ruben Selles. We identified positions that we felt needed strengthening in the window. It's not going to be a surprise. It was players that left us in the summer, etc., or returned to their parent clubs from loan. And I think we give, with the loan positions, we give the manager more freedom, I would say, than with the permanent signings, because obviously loans are potentially only with you for one window or one season, potentially. So, those positions were identified. Ruben was very keen to bring both those players in. So I don't think that was the case with those. Yeah, there were the youngsters, but they were the AI ones that we identified. I think when we, the longer the recruitment, the window went on, you do look at the squad, and there was, I think we've got the second youngest squad in the league at the moment, about an average age of about 24. If you, there were some opportunities, your Ben Mee, your Danny Ings, where they were without clubs and wanted and were willing to come in, and I think that shows, it's testament to the club itself that we can attract players, that have been at Premier League clubs that that want to come and still play football, and they had various opportunities to go to other clubs in the Championship, but they chose us. They came, trained with us. We liked what we see, and I think there always needs to be a mix of young and old players for that kind of stability of the team. And looking at the time, we were on the younger side, and I think bringing those two in when we had the opportunity, and they'd been here for a period of time before they were signed, so it wasn't like they was done on that day. They'd been training with us for a while before that as well, but that was when we made the decision to sign them. So, but I think it was definitely a case of let's get them in, because that helps balance the team out better.
So just to clarify where James Board sits in all of this. So is he and Short Circuit looking for solely kind of the next generation type players, whereas the rest of the football club, you and the rest of the board, obviously ChrisWilder now, previously for a short time Ruben Selles, are now looking at more pressing matters, or is he in any way, shape or form involved in somebody that might sign in January?
Yeah, so the answer is I think he's a supportive role. He's an external consultant that works for us, and we use him how we feel best. And I think that will change over time and evolve, and we'll learn how best to make the most of James's skills. But definitely, for the January window, it's Chris and our internal recruitment team that are looking to highlight the players that will strengthen us for the remainder of the season. They will be sent to James for James to review and for James to give, his scoring on, etc. when we're looking at those targets, because that may help us make a decision between one player or the other. But ultimately, the targets themselves will be identified internally.
And when it comes to that moment, 29th of January, or whenever it happens to be, will it be Chris that has the final say in all of this?
Yeah.
Right. Unequivocally.
Yeah. I mean, and Chris is not like all managers, and he certainly wasn't like Ruben in that respect too. Ruben was more hands-off in terms of the recruitment process, and was happy to, be guided by the data and happy to be guided by our recruitment team sort of thing. Chris is a lot more hands-on in the way he works, and I think everyone knows that. And, when Ruben was here, I spoke to Ruben 3 times a week and saw him once a week. I probably speak to Chris 3 times a day, because he's on it constantly, and he's just it's different personalities and different way people work. But Chris is definitely very hands-on where the recruitment's concerned.
Botev Plovdiv, what's the fascination with some of their younger players? This footballing epicentre that nobody had ever heard of until Sheffield United signed their centre-half and right-back or whatever else has come there. So is it like, Stewart's Folly, the struck gold, or
we're going to find
knows?
out, aren't we? give it a few years and we'll find out, and let's see. I think,
With respect to Plovdiv, a footballing backwater.
Yeah.
It may not be, I don't know, but yeah. Eyebrows raised.
No, and you're entitled to raise eyebrows, Andy. And as I said, there is a level of gamble to them in terms of whether they come good or not, but the data behind them certainly is strong and shows that they've got the ability to push on and be good players, and we hope they do. Obviously, we do appreciate there's a risk level to it. We do appreciate that not all of them are going to work, but as I said, if we can probably get 1 out of every 5 that does work, we'll be in front financially, and the club will be in a better place for it.
If things don't improve, should ChrisWilder be worried before January and beyond?
No, Chris certainly shouldn't be worried. No, Chris will be here for the season. So
and beyond.
Yeah, you'd expect so. Yeah, is the answer. I mean, you can never make promises that you can't keep. But I honestly believe that Chris is the right man for the job. I honestly believe Chris is going to turn the team around and start getting the results we need. And if that's the case, why would he not be here?
Sort of make me want to talk about the idea of planning. So it's been a short term. The board have only been there in the short term, really, if we think about it in sort of real life.
Yeah.
What would you say is their short term and medium term visions for this football club?
I think this is football in a nutshell in the UK. It's all about promotion. It's all about if you're a championship club, it's all about promotion to the Premier League and what that brings for you. And I think it's got to be their short to medium. Well, it is their short to medium term plan, is to get the club back into the Premier League, and for us to try and stay there as well, because that's really important. The effects on the club financially of getting promoted are so important that it's got to be the number one priority.
So how much has what's happened since the playoff final set that back?
Well, we said it clearly. We've not got enough points on the board. We're bottom of the league, and it's not good enough. And it needs to improve. I think we all know it needs to improve. I was having a conversation with Chris the other day because we were talking about Luton that got relegated last season, that obviously come down to the Premier League with us, and what a shock that was to everyone. And I can't speak for Luton, obviously, but I'm sure, like us, they're sitting there at the start of the season, the results aren't going the way they like them, and it's like, yeah, but it's not going to happen to us. We're not going to get relegated. It's not going to happen to us. We've just come from the Premier League. And we was having that same conversation, Chris and I, and we both were on the same page of that's got to stop. It could happen to us, and we've got to make sure it doesn't. And we can't just be nonchalant about it and just kind of keep saying it's not going to happen to us. We've got to do things differently. We've got to make changes in order to make sure it doesn't happen to us. And also, the season's not over. We can still go on a run now where you get 4 or 5 wins on the bounce, and you're back in the top half of the table, and then then you're eyeing looking at getting into the top 6 and getting in the playoffs. There, I say it again.
Points wise, that's one heck of a stretch, and the points per game tally, it makes that seem virtually impossible with where the squad is right now. I mean, I'm almost surprising myself that I'm asking this question of anybody to do with Sheffield United in October, but is there a plan for League One financially?
Yeah, there's I've always said this. I get asked this question, I'm a boring accountant is my original background, and I think people need to understand that. I get stopped in the street by people that think I pick the team on a Saturday afternoon and stuff, and it's
that's a different rumour.
It's like,
wait till the weekend.
Yeah, it's like, no, I don't pick the team. I don't pick the players that we're recruiting. I'm an accountant. So for me, I'm all over the numbers, and that's my background, and that's the way I've always been. And we plan for the worst because that's the best way to be. So we always have cash flows for getting promoted, staying in the Championship, and the dreaded getting relegated to League One. And there's a way of resolving all of those situations.
Right. What's the plan for next season, regardless of what level you're at? When the parachute payments end, dry up, and where does that leave Sheffield United?
Yeah. Well, I think firstly, and it's public knowledge, we financed some of our 50% of our parachute payments so that we got them quicker at the start, to help with kind of that cliff edge of dropping down from the Premier League, and also to challenge to go up quickly. So, and unfortunately, we didn't get there by the finest of margins, especially last season. But so we've got less parachute payments than people think anyway this season. Firstly, in that respect, so because we forward funded them anyway. But we've got a plan for next season. Obviously, there is less revenues coming in, but not as much as everyone thinks because of the way it's all worked. But it will. I think if we want to be competitive and we want to challenge, it will require support from the owners, which I believe they're willing to give in that respect to keep us on the right track to try to go up even without parachute payments next season. Because ultimately, that's the goal for all of us, is to get back there.
Do these owners have it within their mind and at their financial power to kind of spend and put together the type of team that can be back where it was, or indeed clearly better at the back end of last season?
Yeah. Look, it's not a blank check, and I don't think it should be a blank check. And also, there's kind of restrictions in place within the leagues that it can't be a complete blank check neither. So, I think they understand what it takes. I think they're understanding more and more as time goes on what it takes to get promoted and how difficult it is. And I think they do understand that. But they didn't buy a club that was, at the top of the Championship, hoping to get promoted at the end of last year to stay in the Championship. They bought it to get promoted to the Premier League. And when you look at the economics of it and that sort of thing, it doesn't make sense, to stay in the Championship. You've got to get promoted. So I think they'll see it as they need to make that investment in order to get the returns and the value of the club that they would expect.
With regard to January, because it's been the season that it is so far, could we see some fairly significant changes then? Look, and even players that have been there in the short term moved on because they're deemed now not what Chris wants, to make space for others? Yeah,
I think Chris has got a very clear plan at the moment of what he wants to do in January. We've been through it in detail. I've also sent it to the board last week so that they're clear on where Chris's head is at the moment in terms of what he wants to do. Is that cast in stone? No, I don't think it is. I think that will change and move slightly as we get closer to January. Different players will start coming into full mod and others, etc., and that may change Chris's mind on the targets that he wants to make changes to in January. But I think there's a very clear idea at this point in time about where we're going and what he wants to do. Yeah.
Two things. One, door and the new training ground, and also sort of plans to develop the academy. So broad question is, with regard to plans up at the old HSBC site, I think it's more kind of, we all kind of know it in that way, don't we?
Good marketing for them.
Isn't it just? What's going on? What's the latest?
Well, I think the two are inextricably linked, that because the Cat 2 to Cat 1 with the academy only happens if we get the first team off of Shirecliffe and at Door, basically, or HSBC, as you want to call it, Andy. So they both happen at the same time, basically. But we need to obviously do the work at Door and get the first team on it. this comes down to how important it is to get promoted, because if we'd have been promoted this season, for sure, I think, we'd have been further advanced in terms of where we were with Dor. We've identified an architect, etc. We've done all the interviews, and we're at that stage. But I think we would have been further along by now if we had got promoted in that respect. But as I said, it's not a blank cheque from the owners.
So if Sheffield United don't get promoted anytime soon, will that work happen anyway?
I think it will. Yeah, I think it will. But it's not this season, because they've decided that they want to try to get promoted again. It's not going as we'd all expected at this point in time, but that was the plan. And I think that's the reality of the situation. But Dor is going to get done for sure. We spent a lot of money acquiring it. We recently just bought another piece of land adjoining it as well to make the site even bigger, which probably most people are not even aware of. But so there's certainly still, and that was signed off by the new owners, not by the previous owner as well. So it shows their intentions are clear in that respect. But it will just take a little bit longer than we expected. Yeah.
Will fans start to see something tangible maybe with regard to that site, and possibly then the development of the academy status in the next couple of years then? Because if something's going to happen,
I would expect
if the team
in the next
don't
few
go
years
up,
you'll see progress with it, without a doubt. But the situation with football clubs, our fortunes completely change based on promotion. So that can so quickly accelerate the process. But if that doesn't come, then we need to find other ways to make it happen, and it's top of the list for the owners to actually make that happen, because they realise the importance of it.
Yeah, and look, the idea of teams having as higher an academy status as possible presumably goes hand in hand with trying to find rough diamonds, whether that's locally, nationally or internationally, for the benefit of Sheffield United, whether that's directly in the first team or to be sold.
Yeah, it's really important. I think we definitely will. We've got the potential to attract more young players if we're Cat 1 rather than Cat 2. I think that, I think you're seeing us every week. Our teams are winning most of their games at academy level because the opposition is not tough enough for them, and I think they need that step up, so they're playing a better calibre of team, so that the challenge is more difficult for them. I don't think it helps just to keep winning week in, week out comfortably, and that only happens by going to Cat 1 rather than Cat 2.
To kind of bring it back to sort of more pressing first team matters, to what extent has work gone on with regard to recruitment then for January? How long is the list of primary targets? Is a theme of questions that we've had.
So at this point in time, with how Chris is feeling about the squad at the moment, we've already identified the positions that we feel we need to strengthen in January. We will potentially use the loan market for some of those. So I think identifying targets is more difficult. January is always a horrible window anyway for recruitment, I think. But using the loan market is the more smarter way for me. But you don't always know who's available until closer to the window opening, because it will be players that are not getting games at their parent club at that point in time, etc. And that can change. That can change week by week based on injuries and stuff like that. So I think in terms of actual targets, we're not there with all of the targets that we want, but we're aware of the positions that we want to strengthen.
There's Cannon, 10 million. Discuss. Bad business?
I still think it's still too soon to say. I mean, look, as I said, I'm an accountant as well. For me to talk about,
so is that one making you sweat a bit then?
Well, yeah, the numbers do. That's for definite. But I know that Chris certainly still sees a player in there. Chris, as you know, he's getting game time. Chris is playing him, and he certainly sees a hell of a lot of promising stuff from him in training, etc. I don't want to get into should we be playing two up front with him and one up front, which is what everyone talks about, because that's not my area of expertise, and I think you're better off asking Chris about that kind of thing.
In terms of sort of the wider recruitment during the summer, look, as a coincidence, it clearly isn't that long ago Sheffield United played Hull, and the idea of having opportunities to bring Ollie McBurney back to the football club. Chris was obviously, spoke very passionately about it.
Yeah.
Does that, along with other perhaps transfers this summer, feel like one that got away?
Yeah, I mean, personally, and this is a personal opinion, it is for me. Yeah, I mean, I have a very good relationship with Ollie, always have, and we still stay in contact now. He texted me the weekend, actually. Ollie came to me in the summer. He was at a club because he'd come back from Spain or Tenerife or Gran Canaria, where he was, and he asked to train with us, which I was very happy for him to do at the time when he didn't have a club. I spoke to Ruben at the time about it, and Ruben didn't want to do it. And I wasn't going to force Ruben to do it, because I don't think that's right to force him to have players training with us that he didn't want. So I had to say to Ollie that we couldn't do it. I think he went to Barnsley, and trained with him. And then we did express interest in signing him following selling Kiefer Moore, because thought he would be a good replacement in that respect. But I think at the time Ollie chose to go elsewhere. Maybe, Ruben not wanting to train, etc. Maybe Ollie thinking he wouldn't be first choice with Ruben influenced that. I can't say for sure, because I've not had that conversation with him. But for me, I think Ollie is a player that would have done a good job for us this season.
Final, in the next couple of months, there will be a football regulator. And I know it's sort of a hot topic, clearly in this part of the world, but look, just not solely in this part of the world. What do you think of the idea that there is going to be a football regulator and the powers that it says it has?
I think my opinion is probably not worth talking about. The reality is
I disagree with that.
We've got them is the answer. So it's now working with them and how we actually manage the situation. There was a meeting last week in Manchester all day long where they did their first kind of real presentation to all of the clubs within the pyramid, including the Premier League, all attended. I think this is a long process. The targets that they're aiming to achieve, etc. They're going to take years to actually get to where. And ultimately, what are they really trying to achieve? They're trying to stop, problems such as what's going on with our neighbours across the city at the moment, with the financial situation. They're trying to stop stuff like that happening. And I think it's a really difficult task for them and a really difficult challenge, because, ultimately you can have an owner that's very wealthy that takes in a club, but they're signing players on 4 and 5 year contracts. And something could happen with their business after 2 years, that funds the investment into the clubs, which then makes it really difficult for them to continue funding at the same level. And you can't kind of, I think it's really difficult to regulate for that. And I think it's a really difficult task they've got ahead of them. I think they've got some really competent people that they've brought in, and they'll continue to bring in. But we'll see where it goes.
Because a lot of it at the moment, and this is not really a question but a kind of broad opinion that I'd like your response to, is it's been played out in the political circles, and the detail actually is what's required.
Yeah, correct. There's no real detail on how they're going to achieve. I'm not sure they actually know the answer yet. I think they're starting the process. They're meeting with all the clubs to talk about it and understand it more, and I think they're trying to figure out how to make the process work.